So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today's DreamWakers Daily Conversation. Today we're speaking with Julio Chavez, who is a software engineer at YouTube. He was born in Venezuela, but he moved to the United States in 2003, and he went to an arts high school in Florida where he studied musical theater, and then studied computer engineering at the University of Florida. So thank you so much, Julio, for being with us today. We're really excited about this conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, to start things off, we've got an audience of all ages, all locations, and they're just really curious to hear a little bit about you. So could you tell us about your career, your life journey so far, anything you want to share?
Yeah. Thank you for that intro. That actually was pretty good. that covered quite a bit. So hi, everyone. My name is Julio Chavez. I was born in Venezuela. I emigrated to the States, specifically to Florida, in 2003. I was an asylee. As soon as we got here, we claimed asylum, and it was off to the races. We were really fortunate to make it out here and to be safe. We've been here, I guess, 17 years, my family and I. And then I started school in the States in 5th grade. But actually, I should backtrack a tiny bit because my dad actually did his master's in New York. So that's where I learned English. So occasionally a bit of New York just kind of comes out. And then, I was born in Venezuela, went to New York for a year and a half, 2 years. Went back to Venezuela, moved back to the States right before my 10th birthday. I've been here ever since. I started off a nerd of all kinds, mostly about tech, very into math. And then sometime during middle school, I discovered theater, specifically because I watched Whose Line Is It Anyway, an improv show on TV. And I loved that show. And that show actually helped me learn English and like colloquialisms and like how people joke around and how people speak in America. So I really wanted to be a part of that too. So sure enough, I started doing theater when I was a little kid. I loved it. Ended up going to a performing arts high school. But the thing is that you can't really scratch the nerd itch all the time. So I really was like, I want to study both. But then I decided that it was going to be much, much harder for me to study engineering than it would have been theater, at least on my own. So I was like, okay, I should probably get a degree in computer engineering and then still try to pursue the arts as much as possible. So I went to school at the University of Florida, got my degree in computer engineering, and then moved out to Silicon Valley to become a software engineer. Fortunately, I had a couple of internships when I was in school. One of them got me out here into California. So started working at Cisco as a software engineer, and then did that for 2 years, and then got a job at Google immediately after, specifically at YouTube. So that's where this logo comes from. And then I've been at YouTube, I guess, a year and a half, coming up on 2 years in July. And it's been pretty awesome.
Awesome. Well, that's a perfect segue into our next question, which was submitted by a 12th grader from Riverdale, Georgia, who really wants to know, what does a software engineer do? Which I feel like is a question I also have. Like, what does your day-to-day actually look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions, myself included, when I was like a student and just kind of like trying to wrap my head around what is computer engineering. And that's like what you see in the media, and when you see what you see in like in movies. People only ever think about us whenever they look at the hackers or whatever, right? They're just like slapping away at a computer and then something magical happens. That's partially true, but I'd like to think that what we do essentially is that we try to think about problems that are out there that can be solved with technology. And then we as software engineers, we actually communicate with computers themselves to try to get them to do those things. You may have heard that a computer is all zeros and ones, right? Mm-hmm. So as a software engineer, when you start your degree, and you learn about what those zeros and ones mean, how you can take it a step further and basically reroute things into what we would call logical statements. So if this, then do this. If not, then do that. While this is happening, do these things. So you can think about kind of like creating a step-by-step instruction manual for the computer itself and telling it, hey, this is what I would like to accomplish. And so we're taking a bunch of data and then trying to make something out of nothing almost. And specifically at YouTube, I work on the YouTube living room team, which is our way of calling like the YouTube app that lives on smart TVs, on the Google Nest Hub, things like that live in your living room. And I work on recommendations on the recommendations side. So if you ever get a funny meme and you're like, that was awesome, and I can't believe that that YouTube thought that this was going to be good for me, then that was us. You're welcome.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a really helpful way of explaining it. I actually feel like I understand a little bit more, so I appreciate that. You're translating the real world for the computer.
We try.
Awesome. Well, in light of current circumstances, I'm curious to know how a lot of organizations are starting to work from home and be remote. How has that affected your day-to-day?
So fortunately, in the software world, we tend to already have a bit of mobility with our work. I can basically take my laptop and work anywhere, and I have, which has been really great. So that kind of prepared me for that work from home life already. Right in front of me, I have my laptop, my phone, and then 2 4K monitors. Nice. And that's pretty typical for like the software engineering world, just to like have multiple monitors. And I've just had these because of my own need for them at home. Whenever I had those days when, say, I had a doctor's appointment midday. So then shifting over now from like regular world over to COVID-19 world, it's getting used to, okay, this is my only option. This is what I have to, you can't really change the cards that you're dealt. You can only, you can just play them and choose how to play them. So a lot of us have just been kind of excessively communicating through different apps, video chats. We meet on Google Hangouts meets all the time. And then just kind of making sure that we are all kind of in the loop, knowing that everyone's kind of going through the same thing. It kind of helps that we all know that everyone's in that same situation. So whenever we communicate now, it's a little bit more, we have to provide more context because, say, we may not have learned those things through like water cooler chat. Yeah. Now it's okay, making sure that we communicate a little bit more excessively so that we can get things done at the end of the day and keep services up like YouTube for the general public.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of us are learning that now. Like those little day-to-day communications that we miss in the office are now all virtual. It's been an interesting transition.
Yeah. Yeah, and you start to learn a lot about like the things that work, the things that didn't, and then you're like, oh, this actually was really meaningful to me. Yeah. And then trying to boost those up and then realizing, oh yeah, I mean, I guess that one snack run that I used to do all the time didn't actually matter because I'm not that hungry. little things like that.
Yep.
But no, at the end of the day, it really is just a lot of communication, making sure that we all stay connected and then we check in with each other. I think a lot of us are very kind of open to the notion that maybe we won't get as much done as we may have expected because we want to make sure that we prioritize people over product. So if that tends to be the case, then yeah, please go take care of your child. Please go take care of yourself. Mental health is very important. Yeah. So that's been a lot of our conversations, both among us, amongst our managers, amongst the company as a whole. So yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, you mentioned mental health, and I think for a lot of people, music, media, these things that we enjoy have been a huge part of that. And obviously in your background, you're a big fan of musical theater. You've done a lot of like arts and all of that. So we actually had an 11th grader from Ohio who asked specifically about this sort of combination of skills that you have. And they're wondering, what made you to decide to switch paths? And have you seen your background in performing arts influence your work in computer engineering or vice versa?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And honestly, sometimes I ask myself that because it's not something that you kind of come to, I guess, easily, mainly because I'd like to think that most of us are not most of our decision making tends to fall within a spectrum as opposed to like a multiple choice, this or that.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, I was really, really passionate about tech for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And then once I got into theater, I became so passionate about that I was kind of being pulled in two directions. And so I had to kind of prioritize one or the other, just because of the realism that if I wanted to do both, I definitely had to kind of make sure that I took the time to give the attention to at least the technical portion side of me. I had to allow myself the time to get good at that and focus on that, so that I could accomplish that thing. And then, and yeah, it was tough because at the time when you're a student, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, I had a lot of homework. I had a lot of catching up to do. I went to performing arts high school where a lot of people, calculus was a class that was taught in our high school, but a lot of people didn't pass the AP exam, which would give you college credit, for those of you who may not be familiar with AP classes. And it was really hard. And meanwhile, I had a lot of my own colleagues in school, once I started studying engineering, where they had passed those classes and then some. And to them, the classes that we were taking, like Calculus 1, once we were in college, were refreshers. And to me, they were not. This was like the first time that I had ever seen an integral. This was the first time I'd ever heard the word derivative outside of like normal context. So then learning all those things and making sure that I took the time to really, I guess, accomplish the goal of like learning what a computer is and how to actually apply this to my career, and then making sure that I could then balance my life later. So that was a trade-off that I did. And yeah, I'm trying to remember if there was a second part to that question. But the influencing, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so now because I've been so exposed to the computer side, and fortunately I've also been exposed to the artistic side. By nature of the product at YouTube, we kind of enable both cultures. So I do bring my entertainment side to a lot of the decision making that we do. I do think about like, how do people actually use this thing? So all of a sudden it's a mixture of psychology and science. And then analyzing data patterns to make sure that, okay, like, are we delivering something that's actually satisfactory to the user? And so it's been really, really interesting, because then I basically worked on, like, some of my first projects were on the entertainment side, on music. And then it really helps to have that context of like, this is what not just a user would see, but also this is how creators create the video. So like when we display recommendations, it doesn't make sense that we're displaying this recommendation A next to recommendation B if these two creators have, I don't know, if there were times when I remember telling my coworkers, like, I know videos from these two people and this doesn't quite work. And then just kind of bringing that entertainment side of me and then my, I guess, excessive YouTube binge watching side to be able to actually improve the product.
Yeah.
It really does help to, I guess, make sure that you take advantage of the full spectrum of your capabilities and not think about, okay, only doing the arts when you're doing the arts and only doing computer science when you're doing computer science. Like you're allowed to cross those paths.
Yeah, absolutely. And so following up on sort of this combo of career and arts, obviously like culture plays a big role too, your Venezuelan heritage. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about, like we have a lot of educators who work in bilingual atmospheres or with students who are first generation American. And they're kind of curious, how do you bring culture and language into the work you do day to day? And what does that mean to you? And do you have advice for students who are in a similar situation, but who maybe don't see the benefit of having that in their lives right now?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, I bet you if I were to pick 10 people anywhere across the world at random, and I were to show them our app, that almost every single one of them would have at least one thing that they do that would be completely different that we may not have thought of. So with that notion in mind, in like specifically in like the world of like entertainment, we do kind of harp on diversity and inclusion, and bringing people in that have diverse backgrounds, and making sure that they feel safe around us to then share like what it is that they see, really helps us improve our products. So for example, you and I may read text. When we read, it may be from left to right, but then someone from another part of the country, another part of the world even, may read right to left. So something that would be really intuitive to you and I may not be intuitive to another user. Specifically, being bilingual, it really helps being able to tell, like, okay, the moment that I switched our app from English to Spanish, for me, I can tell, like, oh, this used to say entertainment, and now this word actually kind of means leisure, and that's not what I'm going for. And then being able to change that directly, like, that's a pretty small change, but like, it kind of makes a difference if, for example, I actually recently, in the past like 6 months, I started working on YouTube's news side of things. So I have been engaged in the COVID-19 process for YouTube. But when I was working on news, that was actually one example that came up. We were talking about creating these shelves, and one of them was an entertainment news shelf. But then leisure news doesn't quite read as well. So then I had to like change that on the Spanish side. And then of course, I have other coworkers who, back when I was in the office, I could just kind of ask them to gather around my desk, and then I would have someone who spoke Chinese, like they could read Mandarin Chinese, Brazilian guy who could read Portuguese, had a French coworker, my Russian manager, Armenian coworkers, Indian coworkers. I mean, everyone kind of contributes to this app that is ultimately going to be used at a global scale. So we want to make sure that we get as many diverse points of view as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool that there are so many people all within one office that are able to have that sort of input. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's been awesome. It's super diverse. I mean, both in like on the racial side of things as well as gender. I mean, it's been really great, because then of course these are all things that each of us will be able to contribute to, and everyone feels safe enough to be able to talk about it. And it's been really cool. Yeah,
awesome. Well, switching sort of back to your performing arts side of you, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you continue your passion for the arts in, you know, your day-to-day, you have your career, you have a personal life, you have other things going on. So how do you keep that part of your life?
Fortunately, because I work in software, and it is kind of flexible to, it has a bit of a flexibility nature to it. I've been lucky enough to kind of pursue other things outside of work, to kind of get that work-life balance going. And one of those things was that I started performing again once I got when I got into the Bay. So I started performing back in 2018. At that point, it had been 7 years since last time I had actually done any kind of musical, any kind of show. And ever since then, I've been like averaging, I think, 4 shows a year. It'll be a month of rehearsal, a month of performances, then a break, then rinse and repeat. And it's been awesome. I've kind of been, and then it kind of exposes you to not just the people around the Bay Area to see like what is it that performers here can offer up, but also just like the different nooks and crannies of the area, because the moment that you're performing at a new theater, you start learning more about that area. So it's been really cool.
Very cool. I heard that you have been in the Heights, and wondered if we might be able to get a little teaser, a little taste of your musical side.
So with regards to In the Heights, here I'll show you this thing that I used to do when I was in high school. I used to find this really hard. I would try to snap out the rhythm of the show, and so I could see if I could just kind of accompany myself, because I didn't have any other friends that knew the show well enough. So, lights up for Washington Heights, up at the break of day I wake up, and I got this little punk I gotta chase away. Pop the grate at the crack of dawn, sing while I wipe down the awning. Hey y'all, good morning. So that was like one thing that I really loved to do when I was a kid. I splashed it a tiny bit just now, but you get the idea. I haven't done it in a while.
I didn't even notice.
It's one of those things where it was really, really fun. And so yeah, there are a lot of lyrics in my head from that show because I'm a little obsessed with that show, and I was fortunate enough to do it and play the lead in it in 2018. So
amazing.
Who knows what the future has in store? But yeah, I would love to for people to hear that and hopefully check out the show because it's about Latino people. It's about a story of home and resilience and perseverance, and it's such a beautiful show.
Oh, that's amazing, and sounds very timely for the current world that we're living in. So I hope that we get to see more of that in the future. Yeah, awesome. Well, so thinking back on your career, on your personal life, on all the things that have happened to you thus far, a sixth grade student from New Mexico was wondering, what is the most valuable piece of advice someone has given you? Yeah,
that's a really great question. So I'll give you one that's personal and one that's professional. I'll start with the professional one. When you're working in a team, one thing I learned from my manager was that we should always be asking questions. If you ask a question within like the first say 5 to 15 minutes of you being stuck on a problem, there's a very good chance that someone else has encountered that thing before, so then they can help you get through your issue. All of a sudden, those 15 minutes of you being stuck and them helping you out, say, for another 5 minutes, turns into 20 minutes total of trying to overcome this issue. As opposed to me probably not asking a question and then being so stuck on this thing that maybe I'm wasting 2 hours, maybe I'm wasting a day. So the notion of asking questions seems really simple, but it can save you so much trouble. And I, as someone who's very independent and someone who is, I'm a little bit headstrong, I'll be like, oh, I'll just keep pushing through and I'm sure I'll get it. That doesn't always mean that that's the most efficient way of doing something. So yeah, that's one thing that I learned really early on, especially at a place like Google, where it's so big and there's so many people, and these are some of the smartest people you'll ever meet. So it's much better to learn from them and move on than it is to kind of like pound it out. And then the personal one was actually from this man named Randy Pausch, who gave a lecture series in Carnegie Mellon University, and he said, "Never lose your childlike wonder." It was a whole series about accomplishing childhood dreams, and how this man, who was in his 40s, I believe, was talking about how he spent most of his life basically trying to be a child and be inquisitive and be imaginative and be curious. And that really fueled a lot of my own, I guess, notions behind like, okay, maybe I should push these kind of boundaries, or maybe I should look into the mixture of performing arts and tech. Maybe I will learn about that thing, especially because the internet has so many authoritative and useful free resources that we can use. So then just being able to find, learn things as you go and keep that curiosity alive, that can fuel us to make so many great things, whether it be art or products. I mean, you really never know, especially right now in a moment like with the coronavirus pandemic, that people are getting really creative and making sure that we are all trying to get through this thing together. And a lot of it's just like, okay, well, what if we were to use these kind of products, or what if we were to remodel existing factories to then produce PPEs, so that I believe that this stands for what, personal protective, I'm blanking on it, but basically that the protective gear that medical staff needs to use. So like, how can we be creative about our solutions so that we can help the greater good? So it goes beyond just like personal entertainment. When you're curious, it also can help others.
Absolutely. It's a great time to be innovative and to try these things that we haven't tried before. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, this might be perhaps the most important question that I ask you all afternoon.
Sure.
We have a fifth grade student who would like to know what your favorite YouTube video is.
Oh man. So there is a band that is called OK Go. They were made famous on YouTube, like super early days of YouTube, because they did a video where they lined up, I think, 4 or 6 different treadmills next to each other, and they turned them on at like walking speed, and then they did an entire like music video where they just used these treadmills, and they used them in every way that you could possibly ever think of. That's actually not my favorite video, but the reason why I explain that, and this is because they just keep one-upping each other every single time they do an extra video. And then about 5 years ago, they came out with a video where they did the full thing, a single take on an airplane that simulated zero gravity. So they did an entire music video in zero gravity. It was insane.
That's crazy.
And there are no special effects. The entire music video is actually about 2.5 minutes long. But then the plane will fall, I think, at like 25-second increments. Okay. So it'll fall for 25 seconds. Then they have to like wait out 7 minutes for the plane to climb back up so that it can go into free fall again. And they snip out the in-betweens. But you see a continuous zero gravity music video where they just do all kinds of things. And those guys are the kings of creativity and just thinking outside of the box. It takes a village. It takes a lot of science to get that working. It takes a lot of artistic creativity to get that working. And that video just like blew my mind. And to this day, it is my favorite one by far. And to think that it all started with 6 treadmills in a gym, you know, yeah. And then these guys just blew up, and then they created a video in 0G. It's incredible.
That's amazing. I know what I'm doing.
The song's called Upside Down. I believe it's called Upside Down, Inside Out.
Upside Down, Inside Out. Okay. I'm going to watch it after this. Amazing. Well, we are almost out of time. Thank you so much for all of these answers. It's been amazing. Sort of to wrap up, I'm curious if you have a couple pieces of advice, things you'd like viewers to take away from this conversation today.
Yes. Always ask questions. That's the main one. Always ask questions. Always be curious. Make sure that you are learning things from qualified individuals. There's so much information out there too that we just want to make sure that you get things from authoritative sources, and that but you still take advantage of the huge amounts of resources out there. Libraries, mentors, adults that you trust, and make sure that you never lose that kid in you, because it can fuel so much of your creativity moving forward, and it can just really it can really propel your goals when you go to try new things out. It's really important to always think like a child and really kind of go for it.
Amazing. That's the perfect note to end on. Thank you again for taking the time to join us today. And everyone who's watching,
my pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this DreamWakers Daily Conversation. You can see a new professional every day at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And in case you missed them, all of our videos are going to be posted on our page after they air, so you can come back and check them out. So have a great day, everyone. Thanks.
Have a good one, everyone.